Minecraft horror story, when darkness starts knocking. The lights went out one at a time, beginning at the front door and ending beside Steve's bed. Steve stood in the middle of the workshop with a redstone torch in his hand. The first lamp died above the entrance, a second went dark over the furnaces, then the lamp above the storage wall failed. Each one made a soft click, even though the redstone line beneath the floor still glowed. The last lamp went out. Darkness covered Steve's sight. Something knocked on the front door. The sound came again from the furnace room. A third knock struck the storage wall. The fourth came from the wooden frame of his bed, one block behind him. Steve turned with his diamond axe raised. The darkness cleared. A tall black figure stood beside the bed. Its body was shaped like a player, but it seemed to wear one solid coat of shadow. A white face filled the front of its square head. Small, bright eyes stared at Steve. Grey marks formed a nose and a flat mouth. Neither of them moved. The figure breathed in. Steve stepped back. Its pale face rushed into his sight. A sharp sound filled the room. Steve swung the axe and struck its shoulder. The creature flashed red, then vanished. Every lamp came back at once. The bed was empty. The front door remained locked. Nothing had broken the glass windows or the stone walls, yet 4 black marks had appeared on the floor, starting at the entrance and ending at Steve's feet. They looked like wet footprints. This happened on Steve's 132nd night at Blackpine Station, a large base built into the side of a mountain. For most of that time, the place had felt safer than any home he had made. A stone wall protected the lower path. Iron doors guarded the main room. Redstone lamps lit every hall. The back of the base opened into a mine that dropped all the way to deep slate. Steve shared the station with 2 friends. June built the redstone systems from the lamp grid to the hidden crop farms. Elias explored caves, found structures, and brought home more danger than treasure. Steve did a little of everything. He knew each room, tunnel, and chest because he had placed most of the blocks himself. He had never placed the black footprints. June and Elias were in the Nether collecting blaze rods. They were meant to return before midnight. Steve checked the player list. Both names were there. No 4th name appeared. He sent a message. "Come back now. Something is in the base." June replied first. "What kind of something?" Steve looked at the bed. It was watching me sleep. Before he could explain more, 3 knocks hit the iron door. Steve faced it. The small window showed only the stone path outside. Rain fell across the mountain. Far below, pine trees moved in the wind. The iron door opened. Its redstone lamp still showed that it was locked. The black figure stood in the rain. It had moved from the bed to the entrance without crossing the room. Water ran down its dark body. Its white face stayed dry. Steve raised the axe. The figure leaned to one side and looked past him at the bed. Then it walked in. It moved slowly, almost at sneaking speed. Steve had room to run, but the workshop was filled with tables, chests, and rows of furnaces. The creature did not need to be fast. It kept turning until Steve had to step around the long storage wall. Steve threw the redstone torch at it. The torch hit its chest and broke. The figure did not react. He swung the axe. The first hit pushed it back. The second made it flash red. On the third, darkness filled the room again. Steve ran toward the mine hall. A hand touched his back and took a heart and a half. He heard the iron door close. Another touch took more health. He reached the hall by following the red glow along the floor. Behind him, the creature knocked on each stone block as it passed. One hit, one step. One hit, one step. Steve entered the mine and jumped into a water drop. He fell 20 blocks and landed in a pool at the bottom. The darkness effect lifted. He climbed out, blocked the shaft with stone, and listened. The knocking stopped above him. For several minutes he heard only the mine. Lava bubbled somewhere behind the wall. A bat passed through the torchlight. Steve ate cooked beef and waited for his health to return. Then 3 knocks struck the stone block over the shaft. The creature had found him. Steve ran deeper. The tunnel sloped through stone, then deep slate. He passed the branch mine and the old spider spawner. At level -30, he stopped hearing the knocks. At level -40, he stopped hearing the breathing. He reached the deep storage room and sealed himself inside. June and Elias found him there near dawn. They had returned through the Nether portal and followed the open mine. June still wore gold boots. Elias carried 2 blaze rods and a crossbow. Both lowered their weapons when they saw Steve sitting against the wall. "You look terrible," Elias said. "The door opened on its own," Steve replied. June set down a lantern. Iron doors do not open on their own. This one did. Steve told them about the lamps, the darkness, the figure at the bed, and the slow chase. He showed them the damage on his armor and the place where something had touched him. Elias looked ready to blame a witch or a hidden pillager. June said nothing until Steve finished. "The lamps were still powered?" she asked. "The whole line was on." "And they failed in order?" "From the door to the bed." June looked up the mine. That was not a power failure. Something chose the order. They waited underground until sunrise. Then they returned to the station. All 16 lamps worked. The iron door opened only when June pressed the hidden button. Rainwater covered the floor near the entrance, but the black footprints were gone. Elias checked the roof and outside ledge. No tracks, no broken blocks. Steve walked to his bed. The blanket was black. It had been red the night before. He broke the bed and placed it again. The blanket remained black. June opened the redstone panel beneath the floor. None of the wires were cut. No repeater had changed. She replaced each lamp anyway and added a second line powered from another room. If one system failed, the other would light the halls. Elias placed tripwires on the outside path. Bells would ring if anything crossed them. He set 2 wolves near the workshop door and an iron golem at the base of the stairs. Steve moved his bed to the deep storage room. That night, all 3 stayed underground. Nothing came. They slept until morning without a message blocking them. June watched the clock on the wall and made a note in a book. The attack had started while Steve was on the surface after dark. It had stopped when he went deep enough. She wanted to know whether that was a rule or luck. The second night, they tested the upper base. Elias stood outside with the iron golem. June watched the lamp controls. Steve waited in the workshop without a bed. They agreed to stay for 1 hour, then go below. The hour passed without trouble. "Maybe it left," Elias said through the window. One of the wolves growled. It faced the empty storage hall. The other wolf stood and joined it. Both animals watched a space between two chests. Steve saw nothing there. Then breathing came from the space. June pulled the main lever. Every redstone lamp reached full light. A black arm appeared from behind the chest. The creature slowly leaned into view. First came the pale edge of its face, then one white eye. It had been hiding in a space too narrow for its body. Steve raised his shield. The creature leaned farther until its head hung sideways over the chest. It watched him. The wolves barked, but did not attack. "I see it," June whispered. Elias ran inside. "Where?" The pale face vanished behind the chest. Elias looked into the gap. Nothing. Steve did not lower the shield. It was there. A full-screen flash of the face struck all three players at once. The harsh sound burst from every lamp. Elias fired his crossbow into the wall. June fell from the control platform. Steve turned in a circle, but the room was empty. The wolves ran to the front door. 3 knocks came from outside. Elias walked toward them. "Do not open it," Steve said. "I want a clear shot." It opened the door itself last night. The door handle moved. Elias stepped back. The iron door swung open. Rain blew in. No one stood on the path. Then Steve entered from outside. The copy wore his blue shirt and dark trousers. It had his brown hair, his beard, and his skin. Its eyes looked normal. It carried no weapon. It stopped inside the doorway and looked at the real Steve. Elias raised the crossbow. "Which one do I shoot?" "The one at the door," June said. The copy used Steve's voice. "I came from the mine. That thing is behind the chests." "I have been here," the real Steve said. "It can copy his voice," June warned. "Then how do you know which is real?" Elias asked. The copy smiled. "You do not." All the lamps went dark. The crossbow fired. Steve felt the arrow strike his chest. He fell behind the crafting table. Footsteps moved through the room. June shouted for the backup lamps, but they did not turn on. Something touched Elias. His health dropped. Glass broke near the window. 4 knocks moved through the darkness. Door. Furnace. Storage wall. Bed frame. The same path as before. Light returned. The copy was gone. Steve lay with Elias's arrow in his armor. June stood over him with a healing potion. Elias watched the open door, pale and silent. "You shot me," Steve said. "I thought you were the other one." "It wanted that." June poured the potion over Steve. "It did not copy him to hide. It copied him so we would attack each other." Outside, the iron golem was missing. They found it at the bottom of the mountain path. It had not broken in a fight. Someone had pushed it over the edge. The next morning, June made 3 changes. Steve put on a gold helmet and agreed never to remove it above ground. June gave him a named wooden button that said "Real Steve." It stayed in his left hand. Elias promised never to fire at a Steve who carried both items. June also built a light alarm. If any lamp lost power, a line of bells would ring in the deep room. If the lamps went dark while still powered, a redstone clock would mark the time. Her final change was to remove the bed from Blackpine Station. She carried it 200 blocks down the mountain and placed it in an empty shepherd's house near a village. Steve set his spawn there, then returned before sunset. "If it reads the bed, it will go to the village," June said. "The lamps will tell us if it still comes here." "What about the villagers?" Steve asked. Elias placed 2 iron golems beside the shepherd's house. "They will be safer than we were." The test began after dark. Steve, June, and Elias waited in a stone shelter halfway between the village and the station. They could see both places through spyglasses. The moon was a thin white shape. Clouds moved over the mountain. The village bell stood still. At midnight, a lamp went out in the shepherd's house. Then another. The house had no redstone lamps. Dark squares appeared in its windows, one after another, as if something inside were covering the torches. The village bell rang 3 times. Every villager opened a door. They walked into the road and faced the shepherd's house. The iron golems followed. No one moved after that. The front door of the house opened. Steve came out. The copy wore no gold helmet. It had no named button. It stood among the villagers and looked up at the shelter on the hill. June wrote in her book, "It found the spawn point." The copy lifted one arm. Every villager turned toward the mountain shelter. Then darkness covered Steve's sight. One knock struck the shelter wall. June grabbed his arm. "It is here too." A second knock came from the roof. A third hit the floor. The fourth sounded from inside Steve's gold helmet. He tore it off. The pale face filled his sight. Steve fell backward and swung his sword. The face vanished. Elias opened the shelter, and all 3 ran toward Blackpine Station. Behind them, the villagers began walking up the hill in a silent line. The copy led them. It did not need to choose between Steve's home and his bed. It knew both. Steve reached the station first. He pressed the hidden button and held the iron door for June and Elias. On the hill below, the line of villagers kept climbing. Their eyes were normal. Their arms were folded. They made no sound except the soft steps of their boots on stone. The false Steve walked at the front. "They are not attacking," Elias said. "Not yet," June replied. The 3 entered and locked the door. June turned on every lamp. Steve watched the lower path through a window. The false player stopped beside the missing iron golem's post. The villagers formed a half-circle behind it. The copy looked up at Steve. It now wore a gold helmet. Steve checked the one in his inventory. He had picked it up from the shelter. It was still there. The copy lifted its left hand. A named wooden button rested in its palm. "Real Steve." Elias saw it through his spyglass. "There goes that plan." "It watched us make the rule," June said. "Anything it sees, it can use." The copy knocked on the station wall. The villagers knocked with it. Dozens of hands struck stone at the same time. The sound filled the workshop. They knocked again, all together, then a third time. Wolves hid under the storage tables. The lamp grid began to blink. The copy stepped toward the iron door. Every villager turned and walked down the mountain. Within seconds, they had broken from their lines and begun moving like normal villagers again. Some looked around in fear. Others ran for the path home. The false Steve remained. The iron door opened for it. June hit the alarm lever. Bells rang through the base. Pistons pushed stone blocks across the workshop hall. The copy passed the threshold before the wall closed. It stood on the other side, trapped in the entrance room. At least it should have been trapped. Steve saw its white eyes through the small glass pane. The copy raised one finger and tapped the glass. The knock came from the deep mine behind them. They turned. The black figure stood at the far end of the hall. Its gold helmet and wooden button lay on the floor of the entrance room, but its true body was already inside the station. The pale face lunged toward them from 20 blocks away. The full-screen scare hit before the creature moved a step. Steve ran for the mine. June followed. Elias stayed long enough to fire a firework from his crossbow. The blast struck the knocker in the chest and set the carpet on fire. "Move," Steve shouted. Elias backed into the mine hall. The knocker walked through the flames. It did not burn. Its long black body closed the distance one slow step at a time. June pulled a lever. Water poured from the ceiling and washed the carpet fire away. It also pushed the knocker toward the mine entrance. The creature stopped at the edge of the water. For the first time, it looked away from Steve. It looked down at the moving stream. "It does not like shallow water," June said. Elias fired again. The knocker flashed red and vanished before the firework burst. The lights failed. Darkness covered all three players. The first knock struck the front door. The second came from the mine entrance. The third hit the ladder at level -20. The fourth sounded at the deep storage room. It was moving ahead of them. "Do not go to the beds," Steve said. They left the ladder at the branch mine and ran through an old side tunnel. Elias blocked the path behind them. June placed redstone torches every 10 blocks so they could find their way back. The tunnel reached a natural cave at level -50. There they built a room inside, solid deep slate, and sealed the entrance. No breathing followed. No knocks struck the wall. The knocker had moved toward Steve's underground bed, but it did not continue hunting in the deep cave. June wrote another rule in her book. Surface night makes it active. Deep stone makes it stop. Elias sat on a chest. "Then we live here. We have enough food for 4 days," Steve said. 4 days is enough to dig a farm. June shook her head. "That is hiding, not solving it. It followed Steve's bed. It opened iron doors. It copied our safety signs after one night. If we stay down here, it can wait above forever. Waiting is better than dying. Until we need wood, or animals, or the portal." They remained below through the night. At dawn, June's bell line rang once, telling them the lamp grid had regained control. The station was quiet when they returned. The stone piston wall had been pulled open. The front door stood wide. The gold helmet and named button remained on the floor. All 16 lamps had been turned toward the beds. There were no beds in the room, yet each lamp faced the same empty corner. Steve checked the deep storage room. His black bed was there. He had left it in the shepherd's house. On the blanket sat June's record book. The last rule had been changed. Surface night makes me active. Deep stone makes me wait. Below it, another line appeared. Everyone comes home's time. Elias threw the book into a furnace. No more tests. June pulled it out before it burned. This tells us something. It tells us that thing can write. It tells us it understands the rules. It is not an animal following sound. It knows why we go underground. Steve broke the bed. He expected the black blanket to turn red. Instead, the bed dropped as black wool and dark oak planks, items that should not have existed together. June placed them in a chest. We are leaving the overworld tonight. Their nether room was a small stone fort around the portal. It had no bed and no dark sky. The red light never changed. If the Knocker's hunt depended on surface night, the Nether might give them time to prepare. They moved food, weapons, potions, and armor through the portal before sunset. June brought enough redstone to build a new alarm. Elias brought every blaze rod he had gathered. Steve carried obsidian in case they needed a second portal. At night, they watched the purple doorway. Nothing crossed. The Knocker did not appear beside the portal. No pale face looked through the moving purple light. They heard ghasts outside and piglins below, but no knock came from the stone fort. For the first time since the attack began, Steve felt safe while the overworld was dark. At midnight, the portal went out. Its purple field vanished without a sound. The obsidian frame was unbroken. They had no fire-starting tool because Elias usually carried it and had left it in an upper chest. "Can a ghast hit it through the wall?" Steve asked. "No," June said. "Something put it out from the other side." 3 knocks struck the obsidian. The sound came from inside the dead portal frame. Elias stepped closer. A pale square appeared in the empty center. It looked like a face pressed against black glass, even though there was no glass and no open path. The Knocker watched from the overworld side. It tapped the obsidian again. Steve could see the workshop behind its face. Every lamp was dark. The creature stood on one side of a doorway that no longer existed, looking into the Nether. "It cannot cross," June said. The Knocker changed into Steve. The copy wore the gold helmet and held the named button. It raised a fire charge in its other hand. Purple light filled the portal. "Back away," Steve said. The copy did not enter. It stood in the purple field and smiled. Then the portal pulled at Steve. He had been 3 blocks away. The air around him seemed to slide forward. His boots moved across the stone floor. June caught his arm, but she began moving too. Elias placed a cobblestone block in the frame. The portal broke again. The pull stopped. On the other side of the obsidian, something hit the block Elias had placed. Knock! 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 They spent the rest of the night in the Nether. In the morning, Elias used a blaze rod, coal, and gunpowder to make fire charges. June removed the cobblestone. Steve stood back while she lit the frame. The overworld workshop appeared through the purple field. It was daylight. No copy waited there. Elias went first. Steve followed. June came last. The moment her feet touched the workshop floor, the portal closed behind her. The station lights went out. "It is day," Elias said. June checked the clock. Not here. The clock spun without stopping. Through the windows, the sun shone above the mountain. Sheep moved on the lower grass, yet inside Blackpine Station, every corner looked darker than night. Knocking began at the far end of the storage hall. Steve drew his sword. Deep room. Now, they reached the mine entrance. A wall of black blocks covered it. The blocks looked like wool, but when Elias struck one, it made the sound of a wooden door. Knocking came from the other side. June opened the floor panel and followed the lamp lines. It did not change the sky. It changed the station. It made this room part of its night. The black wall opened like two doors. The copy of Steve stood behind it. This time it wore diamond armor and held a sword. Every item matched the gear on the real Steve. Code, Elias said. They had made a new test in the Nether. Only the three of them knew it. June would say a number. The real Steve would answer with the next number in a private list written after the portal went dark. 6, June said. 2, Steve answered. The copy answered at the same time. 2. Elias raised his crossbow. It heard us in the Nether. No, June whispered. It knew before we came back. The copy stepped forward. The real Steve moved back. Both wore the same armor. Both held the same sword. The named button, helmet, and spoken codes meant nothing. June threw a splash potion of glowing. The bottle broke between them. Steve's body gained a bright outline. The copy did not. Left, June shouted. Elias fired at the copy. The firework burst against its armor. Steve attacked from the other side. The false diamond gear vanished on the first hit, leaving the black body beneath. The knocker touched Steve through his raised shield. Darkness fell. The first knock came from Steve's left. He turned right. A hand missed his shoulder. The second knock came from behind him. Steve moved forward. The third sounded to his right. He stepped left. "Follow the knocks," he shouted. "They tell you where it is." The fourth knock struck the floor in front of June. She jumped back as the creature reached for her. Light returned. The knocker stood in the middle of all three players. They attacked together. Each hit made it flash red. It tried to walk toward Steve, but the glowing outline let June and Elias track the real player. The creature let out a low sound. Every lamp broke. Glass and glowstone fell across the room. The knocker vanished under it. The daylight outside returned to normal. The black wall over the mine became wool, then dropped as items. The clock stopped spinning. June checked Steve's glowing outline. "We can mark you. That is one thing it did not copy." Elias searched the floor, and the knocks give away its position. Steve looked at the broken lamps. Only after darkness starts. They had found 2 ways to fight back, but the station was no longer safe. The creature had turned the inside into night during the day. It had listened to a code made in another dimension. It had brought Steve's bed home after they moved it. June opened a map on the crafting table. "We need open ground, shallow water, and sunlight. There is a desert east of the village. No trees, no tight rooms, no deep lake." "It can make darkness in daylight," Steve said. "Darkness is not the same as night. It can blind us, but now the knocks tell us where to move." Elias repaired his crossbow. "And what happens when it stops knocking?" June looked at the mountain window. The false Steve stood on the lower path, outlined by sunlight. It held a bottle of glowing potion. "Then," she said, "we changed the plan again." They left Blackpine Station before noon. June took the map, potions, and redstone parts. Elias carried his crossbow and a smite sword they had bought from a weaponsmith in the village. Steve wore diamond armor and kept a glowing potion ready. They took no beds. If the knocker could use a spawn point as a path, Steve did not want to give it a new one. The desert was 1,000 blocks east. A minecart track covered the first half of the trip. After that, they would cross a forest, a river, and a wide grass plain. They expected to arrive with several hours of daylight left. The false Steve watched from the mountain path as they loaded the carts. It still held the glowing potion. Steve placed his cart and pushed off. June followed. Elias came last. The track ran downhill through a stone tunnel, crossed the village and entered the pine forest. Powered rails pulled them away from the station at full speed. For the first 100 blocks, the copy stayed on the path above. It moved at its slow walk, never trying to catch them. Then the track entered a dark tunnel. Steve's cart passed 2 redstone torches and slowed. The powered rail ahead had been removed. He jumped out before the cart stopped. June's cart struck his and threw her onto the stone. Elias crashed into both. They untangled themselves and looked at the missing rail. 3 knocks came from the tunnel behind them. The sun was still high outside, but the tunnel had a roof. Darkness filled it, as if night had been waiting under the mountain. "Forward," June said. "The exit is close." They ran. Leaving the carts, a knock struck the left wall. Steve moved right. Another hit the ceiling. He kept low. The third sounded ahead. Steve stopped. The knocker's black hand swept through the place where his face would have been. He struck back. Elias fired over Steve's shoulder. The creature flashed red. June threw a glowing potion. The knocker gained a bright outline. Steve smiled for the first time in days. "Now we can see you." The creature changed into Steve. It pulled out the stolen potion and smashed it at its own feet. The glowing outline grew stronger. Now 2 bright Steves stood in the dark tunnel. The copy attacked Elias. The real Steve moved in, and their swords met. The copy had learned to fight faster. It copied Steve's swings as soon as he made them. If Steve raised his blade, the other blade was already moving. If he stepped left, it blocked the path. June placed a redstone torch on the wall. Both glowing players became visible. She looked at their feet. "Jump!" she shouted. The real Steve jumped. The copy did not. Elias fired. The firework struck the false Steve. Its skin fell away, leaving the black knocker. Steve landed and hit it with his sword. The creature vanished. Light from the tunnel exit returned. The missing powered rail lay on the ground where the knocker had stood. "How did you know?" Steve asked. "It copies what it sees," June said. "It cannot see what you decide." They left the tunnel on foot. The forest gave them no trouble. The copy appeared between trees twice but kept its distance. At the grass plain, it stood on a hill behind them. Steve did not know if sunlight held it back or if it was saving the attack for night. They reached the river late in the afternoon. Most of the water was 1 block deep. June chose a wide crossing where they could walk on the bottom with their heads above the surface. The knocker had paused at flowing water in the station. If it chased them now, the shallow river might slow it. Steve entered first. Elias followed. June watched the bank behind them. The false Steve came out of the forest. It stepped to the river and stopped. Keep moving, Steve said. They reached the middle. A drowned rose near the far bank. Elias aimed his crossbow while walking and did not see the dark square under the water. The riverbed dropped into a deep crack. Elias fell. His head vanished below the surface. Steve turned back. In the dark water beneath Elias, a pale face looked up. The knocker on the bank disappeared. Its swimming shape shot through the crack. Elias burst to the surface. "It is under me." Steve moved toward him, but June caught his armor. "Stay shallow, use the lead." She tied a lead to an arrow and handed it to Elias. He caught the line, but the swimming knocker struck from below. 4 points of health vanished. His grip slipped. Steve threw a splash potion of healing into the crack. Elias gained enough health to catch the lead again. June and Steve pulled together. The black shape hit him a second time. Elias reached the edge of the drop. His boots touched the shallow bottom. The creature followed, then slowed as the water became thin. Steve struck its pale head from above. June pulled Elias onto the far bank. The swimming knocker rose halfway out of the river. Its body changed back to the slow land form. Water poured from its black arms. It stared at Steve, then sank into the deep crack. Elias drank a healing potion. His armor was badly damaged. "I am never crossing water again." "You are alive," June said. "Remember why. It is fast only when the water is deep." The sun was close to setting. They had no time to walk around the forest ahead, so they built a small shelter against a hill. June refused to use a door. Steve closed the entrance with 2 full stone blocks. They left a 1-block window on each side and poured shallow water around the outer wall. As darkness reached the plain, the knocker began circling. They saw its pale face pass each window. It walked at the edge of the water, but did not step in. The creature knocked on the stone wall. Steve tracked the sound and moved away each time. For an hour, the plan worked. Then the knocking came from Elias's armor. He froze. The center of his damaged chest plate bent outward, as if a hand inside it were pushing through. 3 black fingers appeared between the diamond plates. Elias tore the armor off. The fingers vanished. The chest plate fell to the floor and knocked 3 times on its own. The wall behind June opened like a trapdoor. The knocker stepped through solid stone. There was no room to run. It touched June and took health. Steve attacked. Elias swung the smite sword and struck its back. The creature flashed red again and again, trapped between all 3 players. Darkness filled the shelter. "Listen," June shouted. The first knock came from Steve's right. He moved left. The second sounded behind Elias. "Forward," Steve called. Elias stepped toward him. A black arm missed his back. The third knock struck the wall beside June. She ducked. The fourth came from the roof. They all looked up. The pale face dropped between them. The jump scare sound filled the shelter. Steve swung blindly. His sword connected, but so did the knocker's hand. His health fell to 3 hearts. June threw healing at the floor. Elias raised the smite blade. The creature vanished before the hit landed. The stone wall became solid again. Outside, morning light touched the plain. The trip to the desert had taken a full day and night. They had lost most of their potions, 1 set of armor, the minecarts, and any belief that stone walls could hold the creature back. Yet they had also learned how to survive the darkness. Each knock came from the direction of the next attack. The pattern was not random. The knocker announced every move because fear meant more to it than surprise. "It wants us to hear it," Steve said when they left the shelter. "That is its weakness." The desert appeared beyond the last line of trees. They reached it at noon. A village stood beside a ruined desert temple. Wide sand flats stretched on every side. There was one well and one small farm, but no river or lake. June chose a place 200 blocks from the village. Together they built a low square of sandstone with no roof and no entrance. A shallow stream ran around the inside edge, fed by water buckets in each corner. The center remained dry and open. 4 redstone lamps stood on poles. Each lamp marked a direction: north, south, east, and west. June connected pressure plates to note blocks beneath the sand. If anything crossed the field, a note would sound. Low notes meant north and south. High notes meant east and west. The system could not stop the knocker, but it could tell them where its slow body moved before darkness began. Elias repaired the smite sword on an anvil. Steve brewed the last glowing potions with a brewing stand borrowed from the village. They bought golden apples and arrows from traders. By late afternoon, the trap was ready. The sun began to fall. "We could go underground," Elias said. "Wait for another day. Make more potions." June looked west. "It has attacked inside a tunnel at noon and changed the station into night. Another day does not help if we give it another night to learn." Steve placed the black bed from Blackpine Station in the center of the square. He had found it in June's pack that morning. She had never put it there. The knocker had sent its invitation. Steve set his spawn point, then stepped away from the bed. "We finish it tonight." The moon rose over the sand. The first note sounded from the north. All 3 turned. The false Steve stood at the edge of the light. It wore no armor. Its face looked normal except for the eyes, which shone white when it blinked. The second note sounded from the east. Another false Steve stood there. Then one appeared in the south and one in the west. 4 copies surrounded the trap. "Only one can hurt us," Elias said. "Maybe," June replied. All 4 knocked on the sandstone wall. Darkness fell over the desert. The redstone lamps stayed on, but their light vanished behind the effect. Steve held his sword and listened. The first knock came from the north. He moved south. The second came from the east. He moved west. The third came from south and north together. Steve stopped. 2 sets of feet crossed the shallow stream. The water did not hold them back. "They are copies," June said. "The real one has not entered." The 4th knock struck the bed. Breathing came from behind Steve. He turned. The knocker stood in the center, black body bending over the red blanket. It had appeared at his spawn point without crossing the wall. Steve threw the glowing potion. The creature gained a bright outline. The 4 copies did not. "Center," he shouted. They attacked together. Elias's smite blade caused the most damage. The knocker flashed red and tried to reach Steve. June hit it with an axe, then moved away before it could touch her. Steve kept the open bed between them. The 4 false Steves watched from outside the wall. They began speaking in Steve's voice. "North. East. Behind you. Move left. Their warnings mixed with the real knocks. Steve could no longer tell which sound came from the creature and which came from a copy. A false call sent Elias into the knocker's hand. He lost health. Another made June turn toward an empty wall. "I ignore voices," Steve shouted. "Only knocks." The creature reached low health. Darkness grew thicker. Blindness covered Steve. The glowing outline disappeared from his view. Nausea tilted the sand under his feet. The knocker had stopped walking slowly. Its touches came faster, one each second. The first knock hit north. Steve moved south. A hand caught him anyway. The second knock came from east. He moved west and struck June by mistake. She fell into the shallow stream. The third knock sounded from the village well. It was 200 blocks away. Elias heard it too. That is not part of the pattern. His voice came again from the well. "Help me." The Elias beside Steve went still. "It copied me," he said. The false call repeated from the village. "Steve, June." The knocker vanished from the trap. All 4 copies turned toward the well. "Do not follow," June said. The villagers began screaming. An iron golem flew above the rooftops and broke against a sandstone house. Doors opened and closed in every building. Lamps went dark in a line leading toward the well. Steve picked up the black bed. "It is forcing us into a tighter space." Elias held the smite sword. "It is also hurt. If we wait, it may recover." They left the trap together. The village road was empty. Every villager had shut itself inside a house. Their doors shook under blows from the other side, as if the villagers were trying to escape their own rooms. At the well, the false Elias stood on the roof. It held a smite sword that matched the real one. "Help me," it said again. The real Elias raised his crossbow. "Find a new voice." He fired. The false player dropped into the well before the firework reached it. A splash came from below. Steve looked over the edge. The water was 20 blocks down. White eyes waited beneath the surface. 3 knocks struck the stones inside the shaft. The well roof cracked. June jumped away. Steve and Elias fell with the sandstone. Steve caught the inner ledge. Elias hit the water. The swimming knocker attacked at once. Its pale face moved under Elias's boots. He swung the smite sword into the water and landed 1 hit. But the creature struck twice. Steve lowered a lead. Elias reached for it. The knocker became Steve. The copy rose from the water and caught the lead first. It climbed toward the real Steve with white eyes fixed on him. "Cut it," June shouted from above. Steve cut the lead. The copy fell and changed back into the swimming shape. Elias tried to climb the well wall, but there was no ladder. June poured a bucket down one side, making a stream. Elias entered it and rose 3 blocks. The knocker hit him from behind. His name appeared in a death message. Elias was slain by the knocker. His items burst across the water. The smite sword sank to the bottom. The knocker returned to its landform and looked up at Steve. The pale face was cracked. Its body flashed red without being hit. It was 1 or 2 strikes from death. Darkness covered the well. Steve let go of the ledge. He fell toward the water, listening. The first knock came from below. He turned in the air and drew his sword. The second hit the east wall. He pushed west as he entered the water. The third sounded behind him. Steve swung forward and felt nothing. The fourth knock came from inside his own chest. The knocker's hand touched him. Steve fell to one heart. His boots reached the bottom. He found Elias's smite sword among the dropped items and picked it up. The water tilted under the nausea effect. He could not see the creature, but he heard its fast swimming pass once, then turn. 3 knocks came from the same direction. Steve struck toward them. The smite blade hit the knocker. A deep cry shook the well. Darkness broke apart. The creature floated in front of Steve, pale face split by a black line. For 1 second it wore Elias's skin. Then the copied face vanished, and the black body broke into smoke. A music disc sank beside the sword. June pulled Steve from the well with a second lead. Dawn had begun by the time he reached the roof. The trapped villagers opened their doors. The false Steves around the desert trap were gone. Every lamp came back. Steve and June buried Elias's items beneath an acacia tree. They placed his crossbow in an item frame and kept the smite sword. Neither of them played the black disc. Its label showed only 2 words. Knocker theme. They returned to Blackpine Station in daylight. For 6 nights, no lamps failed. No door opened by itself. Steve slept in the deep room without seeing the message that had kept him awake. June repaired the light grid and added note blocks under every floor. They told themselves the disc proved the creature was gone. On the 7th day, June moved into the Nether fort. She said the red sky and ghasts were easier to understand than a monster that listened through walls. Steve stayed at the station. It had been his home for 139 nights. He refused to let the knocker own it. He placed the black disc in an ender chest and covered the chest with obsidian. He removed the bed from the upper room. He kept Elias's smite sword beside him. The 7th night was quiet until midnight. Then the lamp above the front door went out. The furnace lamp followed. The storage lamp failed next. There was no bed lamp anymore. Steve watched the empty corner, waiting to see what the darkness would choose. A new lamp turned on by itself deep in the mine. Then another lit below it. Lights formed a path down the ladder, through the branch tunnel, and toward Steve's new bed. The darkness was no longer moving from the door to where he slept. It was showing something the way back. Steve ran to the Nether portal. Before he reached it, the purple field went black. June's voice came through from the other side. "Steve, do not open it." A second June spoke behind him. "That is not me." Steve turned. The knocker stood in the workshop wearing his skin. One hand held the gold helmet, the other held the named wooden button. A glowing outline surrounded its body. Steve raised Elias's sword. The copy did not attack. It walked to the empty bed corner and knocked 3 times on the floor. The black music disc rose out of the sealed ender chest and crossed the room. It placed itself in the jukebox. Music began. Darkness covered Steve. The first knock came from the door, the second came from the furnaces, the third hit the storage wall. Steve waited for the fourth. He held the smite sword toward the empty corner, ready to move away from the sound. The fourth knock never came. Instead, Hundreds of knocks answered from the mine below, the roof above, the Nether portal, the village, and every redstone lamp in Blackpine Station. Under them all, Elias laughed with Steve's voice. When the darkness started knocking that night, it did not stop at the bed. It had learned the whole world was Steve's home.